the first thing I'll say is I think that we determine our impact based on the business needs, right? So so many times whenever we're taking on strategic research efforts and we're partnering with a team in the org, a big part of our initial discussions is around their OKRs, or it's around their business goals, because we're going to align our research work to help them to achieve those goals.
Welcome to UX Ignite, fireside chat with industry leaders. Uncover user experience knowledge with your host, Kuldeep Kelkar, your partner for all things user research.
Today we have a special guest, Kristin Sjo-Gaber. Welcome, Kristin.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you for being on the show. Why don't we get started? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself for the audience. Please.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Kristin Sjo-Gaber. I currently lead the design, research, and strategy team at athenahealth, which is a health tech company. We design all the different kinds of software that you can expect to find in your doctor's office. You know, people who are checking you in at the front, all the electronic medical records your doctor keeps, the billing software, anything related to sort of the successful running of a practice is really what our company focuses on. And what else can I tell you?
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your role. What do you do within the world of user experience?
Sure. So my background actually goes back to product design. That's really where I started my career. So I went to school for industrial design. When I graduated, I joined a consulting firm called Radius Product Development, and there I was a product designer. So I worked on paper shredders. I designed a military-grade phone. I did mascara ones. I did all kinds of different kinds of products. And the really interesting part to me in the work was that upfront research, design strategy, kind of what problems are we really solving? So so I had the opportunity to go from there to join a company called Continuum, which is an innovation consultancy in Boston. And I spent about 9-10 years there. And that was a really formative part of my career. So I was traveling all over the world. I was on a team with design researchers, design strategists, business backgrounds, design backgrounds. We worked across all kinds of industries. It was just a really wonderful experience for me to understand sort of how to think about design strategy and how to approach problem solving from a business perspective. And then I made the shift over to Athena it'll be 7 years this year, 7 years ago, after the birth of my son. I thought, consulting life, this is too crazy with the little one running around. So I decided to come over to Athena. And at that time, I joined what was then a strategic design group. So we were like a small little team, sort of operating in a similar model to what I was doing in consulting, where really just kind of taking on these ambiguous projects. And over time, my role has really evolved, where I'm doing sort of much more research enablement today, in addition to those strategic projects. So now today I lead the design, research, and strategy team. So we are a small centralized team within the R&D org. And we really have sort of two responsibilities. We both lead strategic research projects, and we also enable research for designers and product managers who are leading their own research. And that enablement comes in very many forms. Happy to talk about many of them, all of them, but
yeah,
that's kind of the role.
This is very, very interesting journey from consulting to in-house, and now almost 7 years. And so your current role, as you described, is executing and delivering high-quality research, as well as enabling the organization to conduct research. So this is talked about a lot in the industry around democratization of research or scaling research. Tell us a little bit about why this role. How did this role come to be? How long have you been doing this? Mm-hmm. Then we'll certainly get into the pros, cons, what works, what doesn't work. But how did you get started, or how did the organization get started into this?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, the sort of decision to shift into a more democratized, like decentralized version of research happened even before I joined. But in many ways, our team is a response to the way that the company has decided to integrate research. And so it used to be that there were dedicated researchers whose responsibility was to conduct the research, and then the designers were really squarely focused on design. Then there was a decision, and, like I said, I wasn't there for sort of the ins and outs of it, but to really generalize the designer's role so that they could do the research for their own work. And I have to say, I know there's a lot of sort of debates about how this goes, but I really do think that there is a real benefit to having continuity from the person who is doing the research and learning about the topic to being the same person that's going to execute on solving the problem. And just your ability to internalize what you are learning and then apply it to your own designs, I think is a really, really important. So that was the decision. So the way that our team functions is, when you see designers come in, because they are generalists, there is a wide range of experience with research. Some people have a lot of research experience. Some people are much newer to research. And so our team is really there to do things like, some of the sort of obvious stuff, like provide coaching, have templates, provide materials about best practices. But we're also doing things about sort of just the throughput and the volume of research that's going out because, of course, there's like tons of research happening all the time. So we're doing things to really streamline those processes, like setting up survey templates, accelerating the way that data is connected to surveys, thinking even about sort of the quality of our surveys and making sure that they're gathering the data that teams really need to make decisions. So there's just lots of ways that we're plugging in to make all the research that's happening continue to be efficient, to be high quality, and to have an impact.
Yeah, so that's interesting. When I had plenty of questions. I've been involved with lots of democratization efforts across the industry in my consulting role. So we're great to hear. Right? I mean, tell us a little bit more about. As an example, you said surveys and templates or surveys, but I guess to back up a little bit, research background, as you said, some don't. How much training is required, or how do you, assuming that training is required, what's the cadence, what's the frequency? How do you set this all up for the larger organization? And are there enough resources to be able to support?
Yeah. So actually, this is a part of sort of when we talk about sort of the decentralization of research, part of what is decentralized is the individual upskilling of each of those designers. So we play a part of that role. Like we are there if there are, for example, we just started to really expand on our upskilling programming. So more talks we're giving on research, more live project coaching we're doing on research, but we are a very tiny team. So we cannot sort of have the responsibility to upskill every single designer on research. And that's really where their manager comes in. Their managers are also people who have experience doing research. And so a lot of that on the ground training is the responsibility of their manager. And we are there to sort of supplement. So there isn't a single cadence for the way that designers are trained up on research at Athena. So yeah, I think that's just kind of part of the decentralized model.
Yeah. A lot has been written, a lot has been talked about democratization, but there aren't always those many actual use cases of this working in the industry that people have talked about. So in your experience in the last, since you've been doing this for a few years now, what works? What are some of the challenges? Let's start with what works.
Yeah.
When this really works, how does it benefit the organization?
Well, I mean, I think that my perspective on research is that I tend to take much more of an applied business perspective on research as opposed to sort of a more academic approach to research. And so to me, it is the most important part of getting designers to do their own research is the impact of doing it. And so I am less concerned if it is sort of a perfect textbook example of what research should look like, because learning is learning. Like learning opportunities are really important. And if that designer is is increasing their understanding of the problems that they're going to solve, or getting really great engagement on some of the ideas they're coming up with and really good feedback. And that's helping them to make better decisions about the products that we're putting out. I think that's a success. Do I think it's a perfect example of research every time? No. But I am much more inclined to say I want them to be impacted by the research that they're doing in a positive way. And in that respect, yes, I think we are seeing the results of, the teams being able to kind of learn for themselves and gather that information.
Got it. So, and then on the challenges side, I'm sure there are some challenges, but so what are some of those?
Well, I mean, and I just sort of alluded to this, we do see times when designers are newer to research or less experienced, and the research is not conducted perfectly, and we see it. And so our team sees a lot of that. We have a more macro view of the research that's happening. And so, it's disappointing to see research go out that's not at the level that we would like it to see. And we're doing a lot of quality reviews. So one of the things that we've started to really kick up in like this sort of last quarter of last year, and we're continuing to do this year, are more reviews before research goes out. So reviews of discussion guides, reviews of surveys, like we're looking through and saying, hey, you might want to go in, like reword this question, or what is the goal of this question? Do you need to ask this question? So, we're doing a lot to raise the quality. But I think that is for sure a challenge. And I think another challenge is, regarding the volume of research. When you don't have it centralized, it's a little bit harder to contain how much is going out. And so I think, trying to really get a grasp on making sure that the research that we're conducting is a good use of time. It's a good use of our R&D time, where we're getting high quality answers to make decisions with. And it's a good use of our clients' time, because they are a finite resource. And so making sure that we're really going to them with valuable questions. It's something that our team really does a lot of work to protect.
Yes, absolutely. Any other, now I'll use this term, which I've heard other people use, which is guardrails. Are there, some people don't like this analogy, but I think at least the researchers that I've spoken with that are involved with the research ops function, which is what you're describing, both design ops and research ops, and some trainings, some templates, best practices, reviews. In general, what guardrails would you recommend organizations that are embarking on this democratization journey should look at? So that high quality research comes out the other side. So any thoughts on those guardrails?
Yes. Well, two things come to mind. One, we're actually working on something as part of, so we have something that we're referring to as our research building blocks, which is a part of a sort of like an upskilling program that our team is putting out. And with the building blocks, the idea is to not just share best practices, but to put those best practices in action through things like templates, resources, like tactical strategies. One of the things I think that can be really, really hard to do is to go to a talk or go to a workshop and then hear somebody who is an expert on a topic, like speak with ease about what it looks like, what good looks like. And then you turn around and you go back to your own desk and you go to try to do it yourself. And it's really hard. Like, where do I go from here? Why am I not getting the same results? And my take is that there's a delta between speaking about a topic from a high perspective and then literally tactically doing it. And so the discovery building blocks, the idea is that we're trying to bridge that gap. We're saying, hey, this is what good looks like. And also, here are some very concrete things you can do to push your own thinking forward. So I don't know if those are guardrails, but that's one way that we're trying to say that word.
Yeah, that's a great tactic, which is the whole learn by doing. So you can arm the designers with tools and techniques and trainings, but be available when they have a real life use case and they have a real need. That is when the rubber meets the road, right? So all that training, all that templates, there's always customization needed, and I assume that the designers can lean in on the research organization for those reviews, for helping them improve the research quality before research gets executed.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with that is that it's not just, I see a lot of templates that are focused on like the final execution of the work. Like, here's your research plan, like plug everything in. But where I think it's actually hard is the thinking part. Like thinking through all the elements of your plan is where it gets hard. How big should the sample be? Which segments should we go after? What are our research goals? What is the business need driving this work? So like a lot of this sort of preliminary thinking you have to do to get your work into a research plan. That's where we're trying to create more tools for thinking and tools for working with your team to align on. That's really the focus of those research building blocks. The other guardrail that I was thinking of is something that my team is actually working on right now, which is around quality checklists. So a survey quality checklist, a moderation guide quality checklist, like, how can we dimensionalize what good looks like? So that way, when we go to a designer and we're talking to them, we're saying, hey, we really want to get the quality of your survey up to a higher degree. We need a way to break it down so that it's easier to see where to focus. And it's also easier for them to see what we're reviewing. Because right now, if we say, hey, there's more work to be done here to get it to a higher level of quality, it's sort of ambiguous about where we may suggest that they focus. So if we have these checklists, we can now say with much more sort of direct communication, I would focus here and here, go back in and take another look. And we're all looking at the same things and have an alignment on what those like sort of quality markers are.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense to me. Which brings me to this larger topic, and it's a twofold question around impact. There's a lot of talk about or questions that researchers have, even designers, around demonstrating impact or their ability to demonstrate impact given the current condition out into the market, or just in general. Everyone that does high quality work wants to demonstrate that impact, and researchers are no different. So the two parts of the question are, how does a small centralized design and research operations team demonstrate impact? So this is essentially for you and your team. But then how do the designers that are working on a whole lot of different things outside of research, but how do they demonstrate their impact through research as well? So let's first start with your team, given that it's a small team that's supporting a broad range of designers in a decentralized fashion. So how do you measure impact? How do you demonstrate impact for the team and the overall work?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that's a big question, and I can answer it a number of different ways. The first thing I'll say is I think that we determine our impact based on the business needs, right? So many times whenever we're taking on strategic research efforts and we're partnering with a team in the org, a big part of our initial discussions is around their OKRs, or it's around their business goals, because we're going to align our research work to help them to achieve those goals. And then those goals become the goals for the research. And so I can't really predetermine what those will be until we're working with our partners. But this is an area where I think researchers, it's really, really important to be savvy about the business, because we don't want to just randomly target research. We want the research to aim directly at addressing open questions that we need to solve as a business. And so from that perspective, that's a really big part of how I think about impact for the team. Another thing that we think about is something that we refer to as our SFPI survey. SFPI stands for Standard Feature Perception Instrument. It's like a mouthful.
Okay.
In some ways, I think we could probably simplify the name. But really what this is if you're familiar with the jobs to be done philosophy or sort of position, this is a job to be done satisfaction survey. Very short. Yeah. And we can ask it about any feature in our product, we can say to the user, how satisfied are you with your ability to accomplish a particular job in our product? And the way that we use SFPIs at Athena is that we do basically a baseline where we'll say, before we introduce an enhancement, what is your satisfaction with your ability to achieve that job? And then after we introduce the enhancement, now how satisfied are you? And we're really looking for that rate of improvement from before to after. And we run that after at multiple times. We can run it in alpha, beta, when it's released, in GA, and we're really trying to look for that arc. And the thing that I think is really powerful about the SFPI is it is our ability to quantify the user experience by focusing on satisfaction with their ability to do that job. So this is a measure where we really like. It's something that's been widely adopted by the product teams. It's something that we use when we're having discussions around release readiness, and are we driving the improvements that we want to see. So it's a really simple survey, but is, just in the way that it's used at Athena, has become an important part of sort of making sure that we're delivering the improvements to our users that they expect.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of different examples. This is absolutely an amazing one because it highly quantifies the satisfaction with the job to be done. And there are, as you would well know, multiple KPIs and metrics. But when I look up what your answer, it doesn't, even before you get to the perception of satisfaction with the job, is what is the business KPI? What is this project or the engagement or business unit trying to achieve? And then connecting the dots from there onto the research work. Any thoughts around demonstrating impact through just volume of research or velocity of research?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we definitely do a lot to monitor volume. I think volume is funny. So on the one hand, we want to see a volume of research, right? Because we want to see that our teams are, making sure they have a very nuanced, sophisticated understanding of the problems we're solving. On the flip side, we don't want a high volume of research that's not at the quality that we don't want to see. And we also don't want to see a high volume of research if it is not necessary. And the reason I say that is to go back to what I was saying earlier. We have a finite resource in our clients. And so we really do want to make sure we're asking smart questions, smart and thoughtful questions that really do move our understanding forward. And we have a lot of expertise in-house, right? Like Athena has people who have been hired from clinical positions. We have people, product managers, designers. If you have been in the industry long enough, you have built up a lot of resident knowledge to make you, to just really inform your gut instinct. Now, gut instinct has a lot of blind spots. When you start to overly rely on your instinct, that's where, you might start to make assumptions that may not be true. We want to test those. So I think when we're looking at volume, it's not just a question of how much, it's also a question of the quality and the sort of expertise that we already have. And it makes it a really complicated, metric to look at. Because good research isn't one dimensional. Like the more isn't always better, and so I think we have more to do for our team to really kind of get a handle on monitoring sort of like those different dimensions of quality and quantity and all that.
Understood. Yeah. So I think I have an article called 5 V's to demonstrate impact. What you're talking about is the volume, velocity, but connected with validity. Was this research valid? Was it required? Could we have found this answer another way? Is this a valid answer to begin with? Was this research valid, and is the sample size appropriate? I mean, you had multiple different examples through the quality aspect, essentially put in this validity bucket. So this is great. Let me ask you let's imagine an organization that is maturing in its user research practice, and they might not have a dedicated operations person at this point in time. What recommendation would you have for an organization that is trying to mature, is in the early days of developing research operations? And this might have been many years prior for you, given that you've been doing this long enough. Any recommendations you have for organizations that are getting started in the early days of research operations?
Yeah. I mean, the very first thing that comes to mind is hire research coordinators, like hire people who are specifically dedicated to finding the right users to participate in your research. You know, it's such a gem of our team and our ability to support research for the organization. And we consistently get good feedback from the designers and the product managers. Like, of course, I want to see high quality. Of course, I want to see, like teams doing the right thing, but they have to be able to find their users easily. Yeah. And that has made our ability to scale up research at Athena just so much faster. So I would definitely say, like, invest in people who can play that role. And I guess the other thing I would say is, is having researchers as much as possible in the early discussions around sort of where you're shaping the work, even if the researcher is the designer who's doing the research, like having a research perspective involved early when we're having discussions around the OKRs and the business goals, like as early as you can, is going to be really important, because they will bring a perspective on, the questions we want to be asking and answering, so that we can know if we are aligning with our users in the right way or driving the type of improvements on their experience that we want to see. They're just going to bring that perspective. So I would say just involve a researcher as early as you can in those kinds of discussions, and hire yourself some research coordinators.
No, that's fantastic. And any recommendations or tips or tricks for designers or researchers who are new leaders, or who are starting to become managers, or have became a manager within the last year or two?
Yeah.
If you can remember what your journey was in those days.
Well, I mean, and it's funny because I think about it a lot, because I do have a team reporting to me. So I think about this for them. I think the most important thing is that you are not a researcher in a vacuum, or you're not a designer connecting a research in a vacuum. You are you come at it from a strategic perspective, right? Like, come at it from the perspective of, I am trying to answer questions so that we can make smart decisions as a business. So, it's not enough to just do the research. You want to take that research and apply it. And so I think, from a leadership perspective or a manager perspective, like really be a strategist, and sort of take that consultative approach where it's not research for research's sake, it's research to make smart decisions.
Yeah. No, well said. Perfect. Thank you, Kristin. Thank you for being on the show. Always wonderful to hear from a range of people, and your practical tips, your on the ground experience. That's very helpful. I'm sure the listeners would appreciate all that feedback. And so thank you to all the listeners. Please connect with us on social media platforms, and stay tuned. Talk to you soon. Bye.
That's a wrap for UX Ignite. Keep the UX fire burning. Subscribe, share, and stay inspired. Until next time, ignite your research journey.